Hello, Dougal here, and in this video I'm going to be teaching you everything I know about the crew management system. I'm also going to be talking about officer fatigue and the discipline system, among other things, but primarily it's going to be talking about crew management, how to set up a schedule for your officers and your sailors, and how to set up tasks for your officers and sailors. Now, everything I'm going to show you in this video is based on personal preference and what works for me. What works for you and what works for me might be two different things. So how you do things on your own boat is entirely up to you. That's why you're the skipper. But I'm hoping that anything I show you in this video might be helpful to you and your journey towards becoming the best U-boat ace you can be. So, jumping right in. This is a brand new game that I started on U552. Just took us out in the middle of the ocean because it's going to make a few things a lot easier to explain and go over. Whenever you leave port, well, I should say whenever you start a new game, always make sure to talk to your recruiter and fill out the last remaining slots on your sailors, because I think you start with 16 out of 18, so make sure you get those last two sailors filled in at the recruiter. We have a full complement on board, 5 officers and 18 sailors. You'll notice these question marks under the personality column. I'll get back to that later in the video. First thing we're going to look at is the schedule. This is all default. I haven't touched a thing yet. You can see there's 3 shifts, morning, evening, and night. These shifts right here are for your sailors, and these down here are for your officers. I will talk about the sailor shifts in just a moment, but first we're going to talk about the officers. Now, first thing you'll notice is they're a bit jumbled around. I've got a leader up here, radioman, leader, and then the 2 engineers. We can reorder this. If we back out, I can just grab the portraits down here in the lower right and shift them around. And how I shift them around changes not only how they appear in the management screen, but it also changes how they appear in the tab menu, which I will talk about more later in the video as well. So, first things first, let's reorganize these slots. There. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly talk about the officer roles. Now you'll see when I select my officer, I've got this little drop menu over here. Let me blow this up. Page up and page down, by the way, to change the size of your user interface. Right bracket changes the post-processing filter. So, watch officer, chief bosun, quartermaster, medic, and gunner. Mousing over these will give you a brief explanation of what it does. We're going to set them to watch officer right now. And go back to the management menu. Klaus Graf, our watch officer. The watch officer will always try to operate the best observation post available. He will also try to deal with navigation when possible. He's our watch officer. Observation is set to 9 on the priority list. Navigation is set to 5. So you have presets to select from. If I select Chief Bosun, he tries to handle crew issues or help with navigation. Takes observation off of his list of tasks and gives him navigation, playing cards to boost morale, and, of course, yelling at officers, or yelling at sailors. Quartermaster, responsible for providing ammunition for the ship's weapons and food supplies for the kitchen. So he cooks. Does he cook? Quartermaster. Supplies from the kitchen. Well, in this case, it looks like the quartermaster just handles ammunition, navigation, and ammunition. So set to this, what he'll do is he'll try to carry ammunition. He's doing that right now, in fact. You can see his icon down here. He's activating, or he's interacting with the U-boat storage. And he's going to be carrying ammunition up to the deck gun. So this is all a part of crew automation. Get into the habit, seriously, get into the habit of mousing over everything. I can see how much ammunition is in the gun just by hovering my mouse over it. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. I'm sorry. So, officer roles, they have presets to choose from, but we're going to unassign all of our officers and handle this manually. The first thing we're going to do before we get started into that is set up a schedule. Now, the game likes to give 8 hours on and 16 hours off to fill out the 24-hour day. What we're going to do is 6 hours on and 6 hours off. Clicking and dragging makes this a whole lot easier. And well, we can just leave the radioman set to anything. Or better yet, leave him set to free. So he's basically always resting. Second thought. No, anything will be fine. I'll come back to this. So, 6 hours on and 6 hours off. This ensures that no matter what, there's always an officer on duty, and he'll always be well rested. 6 hours ensures that his performance won't decrease. The more fatigued the officer is, the lower his energy, the less efficient he'll be at his current task or job. Now to set up the tasks. Our two leading officers, we don't need them doing much. Holding down the shift key and rolling my scroll wheel as it explains at the bottom of the screen. Now, you'll see some people follow the lead of the presets, and you know, they'll use numbers like 10, 9, 5, 11. They'll use the whole gambit of numbers. You don't need to. It's not about how high the number is. It's about how high the number is in relation to another task. So he's only going to be doing 3 things: observation, navigation, and sleep. So we only need to set them in order of 3 priorities. We're going to put navigation higher than observation. This way, if our navigation drops below, I believe it's 35%, if it drops below 35%, the officer will automatically leave his post at the targeting site, come down, and try to work on navigation for a while to get it back up to 100%. We're going to do that for both officers. And they're on an alternating shift. So when one goes to bed, the other one's coming on duty. Now for our engineers, we only need them doing two things as well, aside from sleeping: engines and salvage. Now, I could set in here loading and warming of torpedoes, or the combined preheating and then loading a torpedo, which is nice. The devs added that in with B127, I think. So instead of one of the most requested features, aside from the tab menu, and changing the colored lights to the tab menu, preheating and then loading the torpedo. Because it didn't make sense to a lot of players why the engineer would load a torpedo and then pull it right back out again to warm it up. So if you wanted to, you can set up your engineers to automatically load a torpedo, warm a torpedo, or the preheating then loading, repairing the boat. You can make your officers do whatever you want. This is how I do it, though. I prefer to only have them do a few things, like engines and salvaging replacement parts. I don't like to have my engineers automatically perform repairs because you have a finite amount of spare parts on board. As the skipper, as the sole person responsible for the lives of your men, I usually prefer to be very selective with my repairs. If I had to choose between saving the electric air compressor or saving the periscope, I would probably choose the periscope. If I had to choose between repairing a leak or repairing the periscope, I would probably choose the leak. Now, I believe the engineers will always prioritize leaks over repairing a component. Everything being a component. This is a component, this is a component, gyro compass is a component, the observation periscope is a component. Holding the Alt key lets you see everything that you can interact with, as well as everything that can potentially break. This is the torpedo loading hatch. Current external pressure is 1 atmosphere. Diesel engines. The 4 green pips on the diesel engines tells us that it's fully functional and fully repaired. So again, your engineers should prioritize leaks above everything else, if I recall. But even so, there's a finite amount of spare parts. I want to choose what repairs are made. So I typically do not let my officers make repairs automatically. I completely skipped over this. You'll see that the tasks here are organized into different categories: leader, engineer, radioman, and other. Some of these overlap. Like repairs, any officer can make repairs, not just engineers. But engineers repair faster than any other officer. Any officer can play cards, not just leaders. Any officer can resupply ammunition. Any officer can use the radio. And any officer can use the first aid kit. Your radioman, though, they might change this in the future because it's on the skill tree. But your radioman currently can heal other crewmen without using a first aid kit. If another officer wants to heal somebody, he needs to grab a first aid kit from storage in order to do it. So some tasks are universal, others are role specific. Now, I explained why I don't like to automatically repair. Why don't I like to automatically load or warm torpedoes? Well, that makes noise. That makes noise. What I could do, and I'll show you this. Let's say loading is of a higher priority than the engines. We'll make loading a higher priority than warming. Looks like Bender is reloading the stern torpedo tube. There he is. So, say I did that. Now remember what I said, loading and warming torpedoes makes noise. Look at this. I'm going to hover my mouse over the detection icon. Right there, underneath noise, torpedo loading plus 86 decibels. So what if I wanted to suddenly run silent? Well, I could just select my officer, auto bender with an asterisk, that's his current role. Since it's a custom role right now, I'm going to set him to unassigned. And voila. Now he has no schedule, and he'll do nothing unless directly ordered to do so. The boat could be sinking, there could be a million leaks bursting all around him. He'll just stand there until I give him an order. If I want him to resume his schedule, I just find the custom role again, and bam, he's going back to what we told him to do. He's going back to his regularly scheduled programming. So, if you want, you can set up your officers to do certain things that you wouldn't normally want them to do under a combat situation. You can just change the role or unassign them completely so that they'll only do what you tell them. But this is typically how I set up mine. Engines, scrap, in case I'm repairing. They'll go make some more spare parts out of scrap. And sleep. Sleep needs to be of a higher priority than the other tasks in order to function correctly. And our radioman, aha! Now look at that. I made first aid higher than sleep. Why did I do that? Well, this ties into me explaining the difference between work, anything, and free. Now, when they are free, they are off duty. The boat could be sinking and they will not get out of bed for anything. When they're off duty, they're off duty. When they're free. If they're set to anything, anything is basically the same as working. Except when they're working, they'll work until they exhaust themselves. They'll work until they keel over. If they're set to anything, they'll work until they're tired, and then they'll go sleep. That's basically the difference between that. If they're set to work, they will work until they keel over. If they're set to anything, they'll work until they're tired. If they're set to free, they'll do absolutely nothing but rest. So, if they're set to anything, if I were to set my radioman here to anything, and if first aid is higher than sleep, he'll get out of bed to help a wounded sailor. But let me give another example. If we tell Auto Bender that repairing is more important than sleep, he actually won't get out of bed. He will not get out of bed to repair the boat, even though repairs are higher priority than sleep, because he's off duty. But if I were to set him to anything, he would get out of bed to make repairs. So that's how that works. So, we've set up our officers' tasks. We're keeping the numbers simple. We're not going crazy with them. How high the number is doesn't matter. It's just the order in which the number appears. Now, it talks about profitability. A task, the officer will only do a certain task based on its profitability. What does that exactly mean? Well, let's say that we tell our officers here to play cards, and we make it the highest priority possible of all their other tasks. Playing cards and raising morale is more important than observation or navigation. Well, Klaus Graf is on duty right now, but he's not playing cards. Even though cards are of a higher priority than navigation or observation. For that matter, so is navigation. Navigation is higher priority than observation, but he's not doing navigation or playing cards. Why is he just sticking onto the binoculars? Well, it's because he doesn't need to do navigation because our current navigational correctness is above 35%. It's above the threshold. And he doesn't need to play cards because our discipline is at 100%. So certain tasks the officer will not do, even if it's a higher priority, unless that task is profitable. In this case, playing cards or correcting our navigation is not profitable, so he sticks to observation. Now, finally, to talk about your crew. Your crew, the sailors, will also perform a lot of tasks automatically. Of course, your officer can man the engines. You can have somebody help him. I didn't cover that, but I will. And this allows you to go faster, and it allows you to conserve fuel. But if I send him to bed, you'll notice that some crewmen stay behind to man the engines in the officer's absence. That's because it's part of their tasks. Right here. Manning the engines. Now, if I were to do that, everything's quiet all of a sudden. That's because nobody's manning the engines. Neither an officer nor the crew. Missing worker, helmsman station, missing workers, engines. Yeah, because we don't have anybody scheduled to do that right now. I shut it off. Now, by default, they give you 3 shifts, morning, evening, and night. This is for the crew, just to remind you, the sailors. This has nothing to do with the officers. But I'm going to do the same thing I did for the officers. I'm going to delete this one. You don't have to do it like I do, by the way. You can leave it at the 3 shifts, and it will work just fine. Making sure to hit enter when you're done. Let me leave that off for now, though. So we have the first shift and second shift. These also come with presets, but we're going to dump these presets and go with our own. Now, you'll see the number goes all the way up to 9. We don't have to use all the way up to 9. In fact, they even skipped a few numbers in this preset. We're going to keep things simple, short and sweet. Now, if you're using expanded crew management when you start your game, you'll see cooking, cleaning, and helm. If you did not choose expanded crew management, your screen will not look like this. Your screen will look a lot shorter. You'll only have engines, observation, periscope, depth steers, valves, and power switch. But this is what the screen looks like with expanded crew management. And don't be intimidated, it's fine. We just need to set it up. You could stick to the presets and be absolutely fine. But I'm going to show you some tricks. Now you see, on both shifts, well typically when there was 3 shifts, they had cooking and cleaning on each shift. Well, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to alternate it. What does this do? Why are we doing it that way? Well, that frees up 1 extra sailor per shift. Instead of having 2 sailors dedicated to these tasks per shift, only 1 sailor is cooking or cleaning per shift, which is freeing up a guy, which I'll talk about more in a bit. So we also have engines, observation. I don't like my sailors using the periscope, so we're skipping right over that. Helmsman, because without the helmsman, the boat doesn't turn, doesn't navigate. You can have an officer do that, but it's much easier with just having a crewman do it. Depth steers, valves, which will put a sailor by the valves, which should help you dive a little bit faster in an emergency, and power switch tasks. What is power switch tasks? Well, anytime you don't have an officer selected and you give an order, such as turning on or off the gyro compass, the pump, the electric air compressor, a sailor will be sent to do that job. That's a power switch task. So, now we just have to figure out what priority to make everything. Well, I can tell you a little trick. Observation and depth steers can be the same priority, because when you're using one, you're not using the other. Right? When you're submerged, you're not using observation, but you're using the depth steers. When you're surfaced, you're using observation, but you're not using the depth steers. Vice versa. Cooking and cleaning is going to be the lowest priority because it's not a critical task. So we're going to bump everything up by 1. Now think about it this way. When you are arranging your tasks, if you're a man down, what can go without causing too much trouble? Or if you were to order some power switch tasks, who can leave their station to go perform that task if you had a limited amount of men? Well, since we usually have an officer on the engines, I think it's okay to make engines a lower priority. So that bumps everything up to 3. we usually have a man on observation. So I think we usually have an officer on observation, so I think we can bump that up as well. Leave that at 3, bump everything else up. So now we're down to helm station, valves, and power switch tasks. Well, I think the valves would be more important, so we're going to put that at 5, which would make this 6. But now here begs the question, if you were to order a slew of tasks to be done, it would start pulling from the lowest tasks first. The guy from cooking would drop what he was doing and go turn on the air compressor. Then the guys on the engines would drop what they're doing to turn on the gyroscope, so on and so forth, working their way up to the highest priority to complete these tasks for you. But let's say we don't want the guy at the valves to leave his station to go perform a task. So we would make power switch tasks a lesser of a priority than the valves, just like that. So I think we're done here. Now just to fill the rest of this out. Now, the reason that they set it up this way, the reason the devs gave us these options is that if we wanted to, we could further micromanage this, further delegate these tasks based on the time of day. In addition to, let's say, cooking at night, or cleaning at night, cooking during the day, we could say that observation is more important during the day, but not really needed at night. Making depth and steering always important. Observation on the periscope more important at night. Valve operation more important during the day when you're more likely to be attacked by an aircraft. You get the idea. You can base these priorities based on the time of day. You're more likely to get attacked by an aircraft during the day. Observation can see further during the day. You're more likely to use hydrophones at night when visibility is lower. So it's completely at your discretion how you want to build and manage your crew. This is how I do it though. Kind of a universal per shift. First shift, second shift. Just to ensure that all the sailors get enough rest, all my officers get enough rest. Now this is where you can assign sailors to your officers. Let me fast forward time a little bit. Because of what we just did there in that menu, at the squad screen, we gave everybody 2 sailors for their shift. The technicians, engineers on their engines, the leaders, whether they're doing map or observation, each get 2 sailors. And every time there's a shift change, looks like the changes I made to the shift haven't taken over yet. Oh, that's why. I was wondering why we were spinning around in circles, because I didn't enable the shift. There we go. Okay, so we wait for a shift change. Aha! Happened a bit fast, but you should have seen that Weber and Ganj went to bed. It deselected, or it unassigned the 2 sailors that were assigned to them, and instead assigned 2 sailors each to the officers who relieved them. All of this happening automatically. So now, with that set up, as I just cruise along in travel mode, my engines, my navigation, and my observation is automatically maintained for me. I can go completely hands-off as I travel. Our radioman getting bored, so he's just getting on the radio whenever he's not tired, whenever he's fully rested. By the way, you can also see your navigational correctness here, currently at 53%. Depth below keel, under it. Grid coordinates here. Wind speed, which kind of tells you the condition of the waves and how many days at sea. You can also see navigational correctness here. The gyro compass. When the gyro compass is turned off, navigational correctness drops faster than it normally does. I think under normal conditions with the gyro compass turned on, navigational correctness at 100% will last for about 24 hours or about 20 hours before it needs to be adjusted or updated by an officer, which takes about 4 hours. However, if you get lost, it'll take almost a full day just to get it back. So make sure you keep this updated, because it takes a lot less time to maintain your navigational correctness than it does to reacquire it. Just a PSA, do not cruise everywhere at full speed. It burns more fuel. Learn to hover your mouse over everything. Here you can see how much fuel we're burning and what our total maximum range is on our current engine usage. Now in this screen, you can just assign 2 sailors per officer, but you can also manually assign individual sailors. I would not recommend that at this time. I think it has some issues currently, and it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. They added that in so that if you wanted to, you could assign specific sailors to your officers based on their cosmetic appearance. For instance, if I wanted to, I could give all of the sailors that are on watch duty, observation duty, leather jackets and binoculars. So they look all cool and they actually fit the role, you know, of a sailor on watch duty. All of the watch officer or watch sailors would, you know, then look the part. Everybody in the engine room, you know, you could make look greasy, dirty, wearing suspenders if you wanted to. This right here as well, I should touch on. So this is each shift, being fancy, naming it a German word. What does it mean, Dougal? Well, it means shift. First shift and second shift, or technically sea watch. Well, it's kind of in the name. Anyway. So here's where you can assign how many sailors do you want working on that shift. Basically, how many sailors do you want available to perform these tasks? You would think, well, why not just add a bunch? That way, whenever I perform a power switch task, there are more crewmen available so that it doesn't start pulling sailors away from their other jobs to go perform that power switch task. Well, you could, but the more men you add to each shift, the less men you have available to assign to your officers. So we have 18 sailors total. If I put 12 on each shift, that would leave 6 remaining. So, oh, what's that? Oh, I cannot assign any more sailors to my officers. 2, 4, 6. There are currently 6 sailors assigned to officers, and I can't assign any more. That's because there's only 6 sailors available now, remaining in the pool. If I leave it set to 8, that would leave 10 sailors available to assist officers. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. By the way, it's kind of a good thing I sidetracked because I just remembered. You may be wondering why your officer isn't resuming his schedule. Well, if you give an officer a manual order, that manual order will override his schedule, and he'll continue to perform that order you gave him until he keels over from exhaustion and becomes unavailable for a duration of time. If you want him to resume his schedule again, just select that officer, right-click on his current task. Right now he's working on the diesels. Right-click it. It'll cancel that task. And then after a few seconds, he'll resume his schedule. In this case, his schedule is to go sleep. I can't cancel this task. Well, that's because it's a scheduled task. Ganj is performing a scheduled task right now, and I can't cancel it. That's fine. If I wanted to, though, I could give him a manual order, and then that manual order would override his current task. 2 ways of canceling a task. One is, let's send him to bed real quick. So the 2 ways of scheduling a task. The first I showed you was right-clicking this. The next is just right-clicking on the ground. He'll be idle for a few seconds, and then he'll resume his task, which in this case is go to bed. Ganj is sleeping. I can right-click that, cancel his rest. After a few seconds, he'll resume his schedule. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Am I forgetting anything? Covered crewman tasks, crewman schedules, officers' tasks, officers' roles, balancing your shift versus the available sailors you want out of the 18 sailors available for your officers. Customizing the look and appearance of your sailors, as well as their names. Well, that's just about everything. You can, in vanilla, there's mods out there that'll let you unlock more officers, but in vanilla, when you go to the leading officer in port and you turn in your reputation points, you can purchase extra officer slots on your boat. So let me show you that real quick. I already have a save prepared for that. Okay, so in this save file, I actually have 7 officers, as you can see here. Now, what you decide to go with is, again, entirely up to you. It's your boat, you're the skipper. I chose to go with an extra leading officer and an extra radioman. I did it this way so that whoever's on duty on observation doesn't have to leave his post to update navigation. Now there's two ways you can organize that. Ignore all of this. And you can set this third leading officer to anything. And just like that. These two leading officers, they only care about going on duty for bridge watch. And this third leading officer only cares about navigation. Let's say cooking as well. Cooking, playing cards, or updating the map to raise morale. Raise morale, updating the map. And we set him to anything. Actually, let's make updating the map more important than sleep. 1, 2, sleep, map. Perfect. And because he's set to anything, as I explained earlier, anything that's more important to sleep, when he's set to anything, he'll stop sleeping in order to go do that task. That's the simple, no-brainer way of doing it. But if you want to be complicated, like I like to be complicated, there. This is a not loosely, I won't even say that this is historical. Stostrop, der Stostrop, another community member and kind of the resident historian, could go on at length about historic cruise ships, and they're quite interesting. And the way that they're designed, it's a 16-hour workday, 4 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on again. Looking something like this, but not quite, but allows for a lot of overlap between the shifts, and this does as well, the way that this is set up. And I can go back to my old routine. Slightly modified. Let me quickly set up the engineers. Okay. And as you can see, there's lots of overlap where we have two leading officers going at the same time, constantly updating the map, or just assisting on observation. Because the binoculars, the targeting site is already occupied, when there's not navigating to do, he jumps onto the next available observation post, which in this case is the attack periscope. Well, that covers just about everything I know about crew management, setting up a schedule, and operating 5 sailors as well as 7 sailors. Now, talking about officer fatigue. We took away his schedule. We're going to put him on, not you. Put you on navigation and just run the clock. Okay, he just told me that he's very tired. He's now grayed out. I cannot select him. I cannot interact with him. Can't click him, can't do anything, can't issue an order. It's because I worked him to exhaustion, and now he's in bed, resting, recovering. He'll be unavailable for a duration of time. It's currently 1,800 hours. It's now 2,000 hours, and he's available again. So that's fatigue. You have to be careful when manually assigning orders to your officers, not to work them completely to exhaustion. If you're working them manually, keep an eye on their energy levels. Either give them some coffee or send them to bed. And I'm not kidding about the coffee. It's actually a thing. All better. There's also crew fatigue. The longer you're out at sea, you'll start to get a negative debuff to crew morale. Oh, there it is. Fatigue. -1. So that is a permanent. I can't get rid of that, not while I'm out at sea. Permanent debuff to fatigue, or to discipline. -1 discipline per minute. Now I can easily combat that. Right now they're getting a base of +1 per minute because they're happy, they're content. They're also getting +10% for normal lighting. Normal lighting. So it's not that hard to fight crew fatigue from long patrols. Looks like it was the 12-day mark when fatigue began to set in, which is fine. It's completely manageable at this point. Nothing to worry about just yet. And we can keep it full easily with just normal lighting and playing cards, playing music. I don't know if that's copyright music or not. I don't want to risk it. But yeah, you get the idea. And the longer you're out on patrol, the greater that debuff becomes. It'll bump up to -2 per minute, -3 per minute, -4 per minute, until you eventually come back home to port and send your men on vacation. Sending your men on vacation will automatically reset that discipline penalty.
Alarm! Alarm tauchen! Wechseln auf E-Motor.
Let's absolutely dump discipline. Because one of the other things I see a lot in the U-boat community is people freaking out about the discipline system. The gamer in you sees a green bar dropping and panic sets in. It's understandable. It's a normal reaction in a video game to panic when you see a green bar dropping, but it's not actually that big a deal. Two things happen in the background. The game performs 2 dice rolls for you, like a dungeon master in D&D, when discipline hits 0%. These question marks that I was talking about earlier, underneath the personality column. These crewmen's personality traits has not been revealed yet. When discipline hits 0, the first dice roll the game performs in the background is picking one of your sailors completely at random, a 1 in 18 chance of somebody getting picked. Somebody will get picked. That, for certain, is sure. But who's picked is randomized. The second dice roll that happens is if their personality is unrevealed, it will be revealed. They'll either be a coward, they'll have a weak heart, they'll be an invalid, or they'll be a stoic sea wolf. Now, again, it's nothing to panic about. If they have a heart attack, at least they're doing it quietly. It won't make any noise. It won't alert the enemy to your presence. They'll keel over on the deck. Somebody will have to carry them to bed. And then you just have your radioman treat him without a first aid kit, or have an officer grab a first aid kit and treat the man with a heart attack. He'll get better, and then he'll be fine again. He'll be fine until the next discipline check. Now, again, just because you have a man on your crew who has a weak heart doesn't mean he'll always have a heart attack every time discipline hits 0. The game picks one of your sailors at random. Now, granted, men with heart attacks might have a higher chance of getting picked than other sailors, but it's still randomized. If he's a coward, he'll run around the boat screaming, panicking, crying.
Alarm! Alarm tauchen!
There's nobody at the depth stairs because I didn't program that in. Oops.
Auf Seerohrtiefe. 30. 50. 70. 90.
Ah, that's cool, Dougal. What is that? Why don't I have that on my game?
110.
Part of the TDC mod. Get you one!
130. Ei, ei, Herr Kaloy.
Blue lighting for oxygen conservation.
150.
Minus 15% to oxygen consumption. Current depth, -3 discipline per minute.
200 Meter.
160.
The deeper we go, the faster discipline drops.
180.
And they're fatigued to boot. This will take no time at all.
200.
Okay, and we're about to get our first dice roll.
190.
Nothing happened? No cowards? Let's try that again.
200.
Oh, heart attack.
190.
So the game knocked us out of time compression when that happened. It didn't used to. It didn't used to. In previous versions of the game, if you were under time compression and your sailor had a heart attack, that 5-minute timer the game gives you would go over in a second, and he'd be dead. Thankfully, the game knocks you out of time compression now, so you can react to the situation. He's currently being carried to his bunk. The timer is paused, thankfully, while he's being carried, and doesn't resume until he's actually in his bunk. So now I just need to find my radio officer.
Aye, aye, Herr Kaloy.
Treat Eric Luther.
Kapitän. Bestätigt. Herr Kaloy.
Gonna have him block the leak.
Bestätigt.
And he's been treated. No problem.
Erledigt. Schaden repariert.
Leaks should probably drop crew discipline even more. I'm just saying. 6,000 liters of water on board.
Herr Kaloy. Kapitän. Sehr wohl, Herr Kaloy. Herr Kaloy. Sehr wohl, Herr Kaloy. Erledigt. Schaden repariert.
Trying to show you crew discipline. And I'm also ending up showing you damage control as well. Go figure.
150. 130. 110. 90. 70. 50. 30. Aufseerohrtiefe.
Wechseln auf Dieselmotor.
But yeah. Now, if it bothers you that much, you could just leave port, do some training dives, stress the crap out of your crew, trying to provoke them into panicking and freaking out so that it can reveal their personality traits to you. Oh, look at that. We have a seawolf. We have one seawolf and one heart attack. What you want is seawolves on board, because seawolves don't care about drops in discipline. Drops in discipline do not affect seawolves whatsoever. So yeah, if the discipline system bothers you that much, you could leave port, do some training dives, some practice drills, freak your crew out, get the cowards and the invalids to reveal themselves, so you can just go back to port and replace them with fresh crew. But again, I think the system is fine. I don't think it's worth that much concern. I think you can play the game normally just fine. Your first and second patrols, your first two patrols are going to be interesting ones, because that's when, all of the cowards and invalids will, reveal themselves. But, by your third or fourth patrol, you're going to have a boat that's, more than half all seawolves. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just play the game normally. By your fifth patrol, you'll have a boat full of seawolves. Yay, we're back in port. Okay, so we're going to talk to the recruiter.
Kapitän, das kann deine neue Crew sein. Lassen Sie mich wissen, wenn Sie...
We're going to get rid of Eric Luther. And we're going to enlist his replacement. Just like that. And that's just about it. Thank you for watching. Again, everything I showed you in this video is what works for me. What you do on your boat, entirely up to you. What works for you may not necessarily work for me, but I hope everything I showed you in this video helped you in some way. Good luck in becoming the best U-boat ace you possibly can be. Dougal, signing out.